absolutely going to confront this president for his wrongdoing, but we are also each running to be the president who will lead this country after the Trump presidency comes to an end.
I learned, number one, that Donald Trump doesn't want me to be the nominee.
Women are held to a higher standard. Otherwise, we could play a game called Name Your Favorite Woman President.
There are only 2 countries in the world that don't have paid family leave for new moms, and we need to get off this list as soon as possible.
I've spent more time in the Situation Room, more time abroad, more time than anybody up here.
We're going to vote, and we're going to want Medicare for all.
Senator, thank you, Senator. Senator Sanders, let me bring you into this conversation and ask you the question.
We as Democrats have got to start talking not just about how he attacks from a stage, but how we grow wealth in this country amongst those disadvantaged communities that are not seeing it.
Zinhle Essamuah here at NowThis headquarters, and we are breaking down everything that just happened at the 5th Democratic debate. I am joined by a stellar panel. Hello. I'm joined here with Nayyera Haq, who previously served as a senior director at the White House, senior advisor at the State Department, and a spokesperson at the Treasury. Carrie Twigg is a NowThis contributor. She was a former special assistant to President Obama and served as the director of public engagement for Vice President Biden. And Versha Sharma is a senior correspondent and managing editor at NowThis News. Thank you all for being here with us.
Yeah, this is great.
So let's just dive in. How do we feel about how this 5th Democratic debate in Atlanta, Georgia went?
It was so thoughtful, and there was so much actual substantive content there. And yes, healthcare is a challenge and an issue, but they didn't get bogged down in the details of one plan versus another, and really touched a broad variety of topics. I mean, everything from childcare. I thought the discussion of the elder care and childcare crunch really resonated because so many of us are in that space in life right now, and a very lengthy section on foreign policy, which is a first for a Democratic debate.
Yeah, I thought that the tone was strikingly different than at least what we were expecting.
Yeah.
It seemed to be a ratcheting down of the tension amongst the candidates and sort of in a way when we expected the attacks to really ramp up, particularly for Pete Buttigieg. So that was interesting. It was almost friendly and kind of collegial at moments.
And people tend to think that you need fireworks to get the TV ratings up, but I think there was a lot of conflict on policy ideas and good discussion of that. But there was also a lot of joking amongst them, which was actually fun to watch.
Yes.
But we have to say shout out to the all-women moderators because they asked fantastic questions, making this the most substantive debate that we've had so far.
And kept it on point, kept it on track.
So many issues were covered, and we're going to touch on some of those big moments.
It's almost like women know what they're doing at this.
No, you love to see it. And I encourage all of our viewers, comment, share the show with your friends. We want to hear your thoughts also. So we'll jump in now to who we think won and who we think lost. Let's name maybe 3 winners, 2 losers. What are we feeling?
I think Kamala Harris is a clear winner, if not like the winner of tonight. She did an amazing job. People have been writing off her campaign already. She's had a few lackluster performances in past debates, but tonight she was strong. She was on fire. She was on point. She started off talking about Gordon Sondland's testimony from today and saying how it shows the Trump White House is essentially a criminal enterprise, strong language from a former prosecutor, and she kind of kept that tone the whole night through.
And impressive when you consider her team has been shrinking.
Yes. I mean, that is the reality of her campaign, that they have been shrinking and pulling people out of some of the key early voting states. But, I mean, I at least see on Twitter, a lot of people had very positive reactions to her performance tonight. So it'll be interesting to see if she has any kind of bounce in the polls.
And to make sure, like, she's keeping a strong game running in South Carolina. So that seems to be the strategy, that if she makes it to that point, then she could potentially resurge. Totally agree with you on the Kamala, really shining tonight and speaking in very personal ways. Amy Klobuchar also. I mean, she's really played up the relatability card. I was surprised to hear she was the first person to bring up voting rights as one of the existential challenges for democracy, offered that we should automatically register people when they turn 18. That'll dramatically change the electorate, and also about paper ballots as a backup to that system. But she really does appeal to the folks, I think, who are struggling with the tensions in the Democratic Party of who's going to pay for what and who bears the brunt of the responsibility. So she's shown, I think, today as a moderate voice that potentially could be first female commander-in-chief.
Yep.
Okay, we've hit 2.
I think both of those are very accurate. I think also Mayor Buttigieg did a phenomenal job in the sense that he didn't get attacked in the way that we thought he would. He had a phenomenal night. A lot of punches were pulled. We saw Senator Harris pull a couple punches when she could have laid into him. And Senator Klobuchar came for him a little bit at the end, but again, not, that's after previously in the debate saying that she is honored to be on stage next to him. So he had a really good night. I thought he did phenomenally on the answer about the trade war and particularly what farmers are going through. That'll play very well in Iowa, where he is leading, and that could really bounce him into kind of cement his frontrunner status.
And he even used the folksy reference to a farmer he met in Iowa.
Well, he's a folksy guy, as he likes to remind us.
Yeah. All right, so let's pivot now to losers. Who are we not feeling so much? Who did not perform as well?
Tulsi Gabbard.
Can we vote her off the island yet?
I mean, well,
and
Kamala
exchange her
Harris,
for Castro,
Senator
right?
Harris.
Castro on stage.
I mean, listen, or she should just, I mean, if she's going to diss the Democratic Party in which she's standing there to be on their platform, like just go ahead and sign up for the Trump Tulsi ticket. Like, she's got
already
a great
tweeted
base.
clips of her. The Trump campaign is tweeting clips of her tonight. That's how much her rhetoric was kind of being used against Democrats directly.
She has kind of been the rogue agent when it comes to the Democratic candidates. People aren't sure where to place her.
There. Very interesting. Very noted.
I don't have a problem with someone criticizing the Democratic Party. I think that's part of the process. People are animated into being a Democrat for many different reasons, and that's one of the distinct characteristics of our party. And so that critique, I think, should be welcome, and that there is a place for it. But she has acquitted herself in a way that is antagonistic and not particularly respectful of a lot of her colleagues who have done tremendous things, no matter what your policy differences with them may be. And I think we saw Senator Harris really run out of patience and
that was
come for her in a way that was both entertaining, but also just so well done. But like, she finished her off. It was, I mean, that was unbelievable.
It was a great moment, and I think I will pivot a little bit of adjust what I said. It's less about her not sticking up for the party, which clearly is flawed and has problems, and this is part of the primary process, but democratic values.
Yeah.
Right? That when Kamala Harris, Senator Harris mentioned, you will not disavow a murderous dictator.
Yeah.
Right? I kind of wish that question about what will you say in the first phone call to Putin, that Mayor Pete got, which was a great moment there. I wish I'd gone to Tulsi and we'd gotten the answer from her.
I don't think she would have known what to say, but it would have been interesting to see what her response would be.
Yeah, okay, so I'm hearing Gabbard.
Yes, Gabbard.
What about the second loser?
I think Tom Steyer, actually, he started a little bit strong. His strongest moment was when he talked about climate, but other than that, he barely spoke in the second half of the debate. We didn't really hear from him. He's got the billionaire status, and that's pretty much why he's on the stage, right? He was able to buy enough airtime, essentially, to get enough of a bump in the poll and have 160,000 donors, I think it was. But I mean, totally flat night, just really no memorable moments from him.
And he got a question about public housing when the former Secretary of Housing was not able to make it onto stage. So I think that moment, that all just encapsulates the challenges that we have with the party structure right now.
And it was interesting who got screen time and when during this debate.
And I think Tom Steyer actually did a decent job with the housing question, with the affordable housing question, but you could tell that he is not debate sharpened yet, because he kind of got lost. He had the first few sentences were very good and articulate, and then he just sort of petered off into squishy, people need houses, and that's not sufficient for a billionaire from California, a state with the biggest housing crisis in a country plagued by a housing crisis. So yeah, I would definitely agree he's a loser. I also think, unfortunately, that Cory Booker didn't have the night that he could have really used. I don't think he was able to catapult himself and have moments to shine towards the end. Hopefully people hung in and viewers watched till the end, because he really came into his own and had some profound moments at the very tail end of the debate. But, he really needs to, if he's going to stay in this, if he's going to catapult, if he's going to make it through spring, then he needs to start really making an impact in these debates. And we haven't quite seen that happen yet.
Tom Steyer really needed to distinguish himself as somebody more than just the climate change guy. I'm really glad he raised that as the number one issue and how it cuts across all sectors and all walks of our life, where we're going to be seeing climate refugees from Alaska coming to the lower 48, right? This needs to be addressed. However, he could potentially be commander-in-chief, so he needed to broaden himself, or at least find a way to interject that he just didn't cut through.
And in this debate, we didn't hear much talk about climate. We had one meaningful exchange, but other than that, I mean, that was not a focal point for something that pretty much everyone on the debate was very quick to correct Tom Steyer and saying that they would say that it's their #1 priority or a top existential threat. We spent very little time on climate.
Biden landed very strongly on climate, I think teeing off of what Steyer mentioned, in mentioning the billions of dollars of Recovery Act investments that were made in the Obama administration. And what we're seeing now is the payoff of that in green tech and energy. Wind energy is 4 times the use. We have, I think, solar utility is 40 times the use now we're seeing because of that investment that started 10 years ago.
And we didn't really hear him weigh in on this, but Bernie Sanders unveiled the Green New Deal for Public Housing Act last week with Ocasio-Cortez, it's a really fascinating bill that has some interesting details about how they want to fund affordable but also sustainable, environmentally sustainable housing across the country. Unfortunately, we didn't get to hear about it tonight.
And there were so many issues covered, as we talked about, but there were a lot overlooked, gun reform being one of them. The U.S. just had its 38th mass shooting at an American school this year, but it was hardly discussed.
It came up as I think Bernie Sanders mentioned it as a part of one of his responses. And then towards the end, former Vice President Biden mentioned it. But given this very real crisis we're facing and the number of shootings we've seen, including this last week, and even when we're having a debate with all female moderators, acknowledging how women have played a role in really taking down the NRA, like Moms Demand Action, and the organizing that's happened around this, it just really seems like the missed opportunity to speak to a really vocal part of the Democratic base and the country writ large.
Yeah. I mean, again, we've one of our themes tonight has been all the candidates and voices that were missing from this. But, you know, with Beto O'Rourke.
Yes.
Ooh. With Beto O'Rourke no longer in the race, he was very much the person to constantly bring this up, right? And so there's issues that sort of were housed by individual candidates that once they are gone, no one really is trumpeting them. There's so much ground to cover. And as we were saying, people are Democrats for a lot of different reasons, and people vote for a lot of different reasons. So every candidate's trying to get to the piece that they feel most comfortable speaking on, as well as the ones that they think their voters care about the most. And so a lot of these key issues are just falling through the cracks.
Student loans didn't get as much heavy play as it should have, given the gravity of the crisis.
44 million people.
44 million, 2/3 of which are women. So also a unique challenge that families are facing. There is I think each of them have made some side of commitment of how they would deal with a student loan crisis, including debt forgiveness. But I think it's important to note that there is a George Bush era program that actually is already trying to implement student loan forgiveness, specifically for public sector or nonprofit employees. And it was 10 years, and after 10 years of service, you can get your student loans forgiven. But the bureaucracy has only allowed 600 people out of hundreds of thousands of people eligible to actually get that benefit. So this is a challenge. There's an example of this in government right now, and it is failing people. So that's, as we talk about the details of how to implement healthcare, it'll be important to hear what are the details of implementing student loans on free college for people.
And candidates have very different stances on this, right? Some say let's cancel student loan debt. Some say free college, and others like Klobuchar say that's not realistic given the state of national debt. Does anyone stand out to you with their student loan programs or policies?
Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have the strongest plans on this, and I think it's a shame that it got a little bit short shrift tonight, even though I think overall the debate was very substantive. But Klobuchar did get her line in there that I don't want to pay to send rich kids to college, and I can understand the sentiment that she's expressing there, but it's not really addressing the fuller crisis. The statistics you just mentioned are shocking. Those are the numbers that we should be talking about.
And it goes to that broader idea that people are like, well, I don't want to have to pay for somebody else's issues, and then the other side saying, well, we're all in this together. And she certainly is straddling that divide and what we now call moderates by saying that, you know, not everybody should have to pay, and some of those people happen to be wealthy.
This is an area where I thought Senator Warren was especially strong. I think it was early in the debate. They brought up the wealth tax. Cory Booker's trying to draw a distinction between the two of them on that. He says he doesn't completely agree with it. But she did such a good and clear job of explaining it's pennies on the dollar for the billionaires.
2 cents.
I think she said 2 cents. The first $50 billion that you earn or that you have or own is clear and free. But what she's trying to say is that billionaires got to where they are, they're able to keep and maintain their wealth because of taxpayer money that built the roads that you use every day, the public services, the employees that you're working with. And I think she made such a strong and clear argument for that wealth tax and why people like Steyer should really acknowledge that more.
And we saw a bit of a level set there, which was appreciative with her back and forth with Cory Booker. He's like, no, we're not disagreeing on this. Actually, we're disagreeing on the details, but we fundamentally agree that corporations should be paying taxes, that Amazon and FedEx should not be paying 0%. And he brought that home, I think, a little bit stronger at the end when he also talked about what's at stake, who's in this, and the black-white wealth gap, which I think this is the first time we've really heard a conversation explicitly talking about systemic racism.
Yeah, and I want our audience to see this moment, which we have, so let's take a look.
2-cent wealth tax, and we can invest in an entire generation's future.
Senator Booker respond.
Sure.
You know, again, I agree with the need to do all of those things. We're all united in wanting to see universal preschool, and I'll fight for that. We're all united in wanting to fund HBCUs. Heck, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for two parents that went to HBCUs. But the tax, the way we're putting it forward right now, the wealth tax, I'm sorry, it's cumbersome. It's been tried by other nations. It's hard to evaluate. We can get the same amount of revenue through just taxation. But again, we as Democrats have got to start talking not just about how we tax from a stage, but how we grow wealth in this country amongst those disadvantaged communities that are not seeing it. Look at VC dollars in this country. 75% of them go to 3 metropolitan areas. There is worth in the inner city. There is value in our rural areas. If I am president of the United States, we're going to have a fair, just taxation where millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share. But dear God, we're going to have pathways to prosperity for more Americans. We're going to see a change in what we see right now. Small businesses, new startups are going down in this country.
Thank you,
we
Senator.
need to give
Senator
more
Warren,
new entrepreneurs
Senator Warren,
access
briefly,
to wealth.
just your last thoughts on this.
The idea behind what is fair. Today, the 99% in America are on track to pay about 7.2% of their total wealth in taxes.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
The top 0.1% that I want to say pay 2 cents more, they'll pay 3.2% in America. I'm tired of freeloading billionaires. I think it's time that we ask those at the very top to pay more so that every single one of our children gets a real chance.
Everybody is tired of freeloading billionaires. Everybody's tired of corporations getting away with paying 0 taxes.
I mean, I'm tired of freeloading billionaires. If that's not a perfect bumper sticker for a lot of people, I don't know what is.
There seems to be a pretty big divide in the Democratic Party about this issue. Another major moment that happened was between Harris and Gabbard. We saw them really spar. You all referenced that a minute ago. Let's take a look. But before we do that, let's talk about what they were sparring about, which was Clinton, among other things.
Well, you almost slipped into this, but with what is it, the rogue agent line?
Yes.
But I mean, and there's a distinction between somebody being an actual paid agent of government and somebody of a foreign government, and then somebody actually helping along the way. And it goes to the broader of where does Tulsi Gabbard stand, and which groups and people are she going to be standing for? And Kamala Harris did a great job, and so did Mayor Pete Buttigieg, actually, of calling her out on her judgment of who she's aligned herself when it comes specifically to foreign policy.
We talked about how she's been an apologist for Assad in the past, which is a hugely important point that matters. But I also appreciated that Senator Harris mentioned that Gabbard tried to buddy up to Steve Bannon during 2016, which is something that we don't talk about as much. And there was, thankfully, a question later on about how we address white supremacist terrorism. And I think Gabbard actually had a decent response to that, which is good.
I'm glad it was directed to her.
Yes,
like
exactly.
that was part of the intentionality of that, and seeing how the questions were directed specifically to the weak points of candidates.
Yeah. And I will also just offer, even outside of the substantive exchange that Harris and Gabbard had, it's so lovely to see a candidate's personality come out, and I think Harris does that better than anyone else on that stage. You get a sense of who she is, whether she's on that stage or not. She is so comfortable up there. She acquits herself so beautifully and magnificently, as we've seen in congressional hearings and as we've seen in every single debate. She doesn't have bad debate performances. She just sometimes doesn't get the time or doesn't quite land something, but she is so remarkably assured, self-assured, and comfortable in that space. And so it's a lovely thing to watch candidates and see their personality shine through. And I thought she did that in a way that I personally found very entertaining, while also being substantive.
Let's take a look at that moment right now between Gabbard and Harris.
That our Democratic Party, unfortunately, is not the party that is of, by, and for the people. It is a party that has been and continues to be influenced by the foreign policy establishment in Washington, represented by Hillary Clinton and others' foreign policy, by the military-industrial complex and other greedy corporate interests.
Yeah, it was a hot moment, was it not?
I mean, it was a great rejoinder again from Senator Kamala Harris, really checking rhetoric with facts, and that there's an experience that comes with having been a sitting senator and a former prosecutor. I think. And Mayor Pete Buttigieg, when he responded to her, also brought in that he had military credentials and he'd be handling all this differently. So she, again, is representing her resurgence online, her being tweeted out by Donald Trump is an interesting thing for the party to navigate right now, because she clearly met the thresholds of the party, of what the party requires for people to get into the debate, but not quite sure what she is looking to do long term.
And to the point of experience, Joe Biden brought this up, that he knows what it takes to be a commander-in-chief, and he brought that up as a major point. Is that something that's going to stick with voters, considering the eclectic range of options we have in 2020?
Listen, the endless wars didn't end in the Obama administration. We struggled with that, right? As Syria was unresolved, even though that was started, there was no military intervention there. And Bernie Sanders, he landed it when he said he's been around long enough. He voted against the Iraq War. He voted against the Gulf Wars. And unfortunately, as Senate Foreign Relations Committee chairman and also as vice president, Vice President Joe Biden didn't end it. Neither did President Obama. And we're really struggling with this idea of endless wars and what does it mean for not just national security, but the endless recovery that veterans are dealing with now. We have a whole new generation coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan.
I was going to say, just quickly, I do actually think, to get Tulsi Gabbard's, she has lost a real opportunity to position herself as the peace candidate that she started her campaign as. If you remember her announcement video, which was actually beautifully done, she was talking about the nuclear threats that the country is currently facing. And she could have found, I think, a niche for herself had she stayed a little bit truer to that initial, what I assume is an initial blueprint, and really been the person to drive that home. And particularly with Pete, particularly with another veteran in the mix, for her to be articulating a different way of using American and articulating American power, I think she would resonate in a way that she doesn't seem to be connecting.
I was just going to say, I think we should remember how unpopular the idea of the establishment is. Back in 2016, I think there was a poll saying every 4 out of 5 voters voted for change. That was like top of their list. And that's how you get somebody like Donald Trump winning the Electoral College, because people were tired of the same old in Washington politics. They may have not been accurate when it came down to Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, but that's why they voted for it. They wanted change. And so I don't necessarily think that Biden's argument that he knows exactly what it takes to be commander-in-chief is what's going to help him, but I do think his experience in the Obama administration and his popularity, I mean, they're still extremely well-liked, both of them, is what's keeping him at the forefront of the race.
I would actually disagree with that. I'm sorry. I would just I actually think it will resonate with people. I think one of Biden's strongest characteristics, and he said it tonight, is that he has this shallowest learning curve. And I think that will matter to people. After having 4 years of a very chaotic White House, I think it's going to matter a lot that you can have a president who's been there before.
It'll be interesting. If the pendulum swings the other way, it'll be interesting. Yeah. I mean, we elected somebody who had no experience in public office whatsoever.
But if this is going to be another change election, then Biden's not the change candidate.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at what Biden had to say about this.
How do you unify this country? We have to unify this country. I have done it. I have done it repeatedly. And lastly, to be commander-in-chief, there's no time for on-the-job training. I've spent more time in the Situation Room, more time abroad, more time than anybody up here. I know every major world leader. They know me, and they know when I speak, if I'm the President of the United States, who we're for, who we're against, and what we'll do, and we'll keep our word.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Ashley.
And that's a conversation. Do you believe voters want to go for a change candidate, or are they looking for establishment? It sounds like you all have some different thoughts on that.
I mean, I think anybody who says that they can predict what's going to happen next year, and I don't think any of us say that or think that, is wrong and not somebody to be trusted. I think 2016 shows, predictions out the window, not something we should be prognosticating about. But I do think, at least in the Democratic primary electorate, there's room for both right now. I think there's an appetite for the familiar, and there's also an appetite for change.
2016 did show us, though, that there's an agitated and angry Democratic voting base right now who are likely to vote against Trump and turn out for those reasons. I mean, that was the wave of women that we saw elected in Congress. We're seeing Trump effectively losing when he's put himself on the ticket in places like Louisiana for governorships, right? So he is losing when it comes to him and just theoretical Democrat. So that negative partisanship is going to play a very strong role. And that's an opportunity, right? This is the opportunity the progressives are looking at, is can they use that to really make some of the gains that they didn't feel like they got in the last 20 years.
As we look at moments, another big one, an issue, was paid family leave that came up from Yang and Harris.
Thank God it came up.
Finally.
Truly.
Yeah.
And I love that the question went directly and was asked to the younger guy with the young child, because it makes this about parental and family units and not just a women's issue.
Yes, childcare is not just a women's issue. We need to drive that home.
Now, Senator Kamala Harris did drive home the point, though, as of right now, women do bear the burden of many of these family costs, and including that gap of elder care and child care, because women are having children or people are starting families in their 30s and 40s, which is not something you hear so commonly said on a debate stage. It's a very real fact of life.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people around the country tonight who feel like they were spoken to for the first time. I mean, that's the first time I've heard a major political figure articulate it that clearly, and that intergenerational kind of limbo of having children and having ailing or aging parents. So I think that's going to resonate.
And Senator Klobuchar also went in and talked about paid parental leave for the 3 months. So again, they went into the details of how long and who pays for it, but they actually came out and agreed that this is something the government can and should be doing.
Let's hear what Andrew Yang had to say about paid family leave during the debate.
There are only 2 countries in the world that don't have paid family leave for new moms: the United States of America and Papua New Guinea. That is the entire list, and we need to get off this list as soon as possible. I would pass paid family leave as one of the first things we do.
Yang actually picked up that talking point from Senator Gillibrand, one of the people we acknowledged earlier, not on the debate stage anymore, not in the race. But I think it's great that he picked that up from her, and credit to him for keeping the ball moving.
And I do hope we see that from more and more candidates, because eventually this will start winnowing down after Iowa and New Hampshire. And I hope they remember.
There could be more.
There could be.
People jump out and more people come in.
Let's avoid a brokered convention, because that just means this extends all the way through July. Anyhow, I think that's the beauty of all of this, is that this is influencing the other candidates on stage and helps them understand where the American people are, and hopefully they'll take that forward to the general election.
And Nair, you also mentioned Harris's remarks. Let's take a look at what she had to say about paid family leave.
On paid family leave, it is no longer the case in America that people are having children in their 20s. People are having children in their 30s, often in their 40s, which means that these families and parents are often raising young children and taking care of their parents.
There's an interesting data point related with that, as we talk about people having families older and health care. I mean, we talked about mortality, but also just how people are able to conceive. A country like Canada gives you 3 IVF cycles for free. That's like just on the government. That's
Israel, I think you can freeze your eggs for free.
Right. So they're giving families the opportunity to just deal with the realities of what it means to be in our modern economy of 2 working families, student loan debt, can't afford the child care, all of that. And so that would be interesting to see if we ever get to that point of where IVF is mentioned on the debate stage.
I mean, it's remarkable to see what other developed countries have as policies in regards to what the U.S. has for paid parental leave. And not even that, but when it comes to just pregnancy and childbearing, or even trying to get pregnant in the first place. Germany, I think, is really interesting. There, if you're when you're 6 weeks before your due date, you are automatically out of work, and in the terms of like you don't have to go to work, not out of a job. I'm sorry, I should have said that a little bit better. But I think that's incredible. I mean, here it's completely regular for American women to work up until they go into labor, whereas in Germany they're respectful, just like they are in Canada, of the choices that people are making.
And all of this falls under the umbrella of healthcare. The United States spends about 10 times the amount of other high-income countries on its healthcare system. So I want to ask about Medicare for All, which it opened this debate and it has opened many others. Did any candidate stances stand out to you?
I mean, clearly Bernie had a great line. He's like, yeah, I wrote the damn bill.
He's always on that line, you know?
That's good for him.
But it still works. It still kills.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that the conversation has wrapped itself around Medicare for All as the vehicle versus, maybe whether it's Obamacare, this and that. When I think, and you can see polling that'll tell you, well, Americans don't really care for a single-payer system like Medicare for All. But I'm like, yeah, but I feel like it's a stand-in for health care for all. And Medicare is a system people are familiar with and knows takes care of people who are older. So what happens if we try to bring a broader population into it?
Let's hear what Buttigieg had to say on Medicare for All. He had some strong words.
The reason I insist on Medicare for all who want it as the strategy to deliver on that goal we share of universal health care is that is something that, as a governing strategy, we can unify the American people around. And I believe that commanding people to accept that option, whether we wait 3 years, as Senator Warren has proposed, or whether you do it right out of the gate, is not the right approach to unify the American people around.
It seems that this is the dividing issue between Dems right now. Also, how do you pay for Medicare for all? Should we even have it? Can you all just simply break that down for our viewers who might still be confused?
Well, I mean, on a broader level, this is the existential crisis. And so it becomes like the litmus test of we're going to debate on Medicare for all the things and feels we have about the direction of our country, whether it's tear down the system and build a new one, whether it's the wealthy should pay or everybody should bear the burden. And so it gets glommed onto Medicare for all. And unfortunately, I think we lose sight of the fact that every single person on that stage is looking to provide Americans with affordable health care, with the resources that they need to keep their families healthy and safe.
And from a political perspective, healthcare has always come with a lot of anxiety for voters, right? So even since the Obama era, when Obamacare first, we all remember the death panels. We all remember the summer of 2009 or 2010. It was a nightmare, right? And now
it comes into the don't take away the doctor I like.
Exactly. And now, but it's still about choice, and it's still about these, we undersell the intimacy of these relationships that people have with their doctors. And so it becomes a very intense thing when candidates are put in a position where they either will have to practically change your options or, say that they won't. So it's like a real push and pull, and that requires some political courage and some political transparency. You have Pete Buttigieg saying Medicare for all who want it. That's his way of distinguishing that little "if" for all those who want it is his way of distinguishing himself from the rest of the pack, as well as easing the anxiety around having people's choices be eliminated.
And a line that we've heard over and over again from Bernie Sanders is, y'all know it, I wrote the damn bill. Yes. Let's just hear it again. It's more exciting.
Why not?
He did write the bill after all.
He did.
He seemed a little irked he didn't get that question first.
It's true, but the audience
Which again goes to the whole, why is Warren getting this question before me?
That's great. And let's now move on to superlatives. We thought about this a bit, didn't we, when we were watching the debates? And so we have some fun superlatives to share with you tonight. Let us know in the comments what you like, and remember to share this show with your friends. First off, we have a little drum roll. Most improved since the beginning of the presidential election cycle goes to Amy Klobuchar.
Yes.
Are we specifically talking about on the stage,
I think on the debate stage. Yes.
Well, you all let me know.
I think so.
I got this from you.
I also want to give an honorable mention to Andrew Yang.
Candidate past?
Yeah. No, Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
He was out there cracking jokes, He was having a great time tonight. And on that first day, the first time we saw him, he was just deer in the headlights.
And honestly,
he's doing a good job.
I'm not sure that I expected him to even be in the race this long. So credit to him for that. And also, again, qualifying where Julian Castro did not.
The Yang Gang is going to let you know.
The Yang Gang is real. I know.
exactly why he's still in the race.
Yeah.
They will let you know.
I mean, I really enjoyed the answer that he had to the question of what's the first thing that you would say to Vladimir Putin if you're elected president. And he kind of paused for a second. He thought about it, and he's like, well, first of all, I would say, I'm sorry I beat your guy.
Yeah.
Fantastic line. Yeah, that was a fantastic line.
And that's a perfect segue into the next superlative, best line of the night. What's your take? There were a lot of strong one-liners.
Yeah. I think overall the most volume of one-liners we saw came out of Bernie tonight. He also fed a couple to Joe Biden as he was standing next to him in that when the exchange about North Korea. So my vote would be for Bernie.
I would say Cory Booker near the end of the debate when he said to Biden, Biden recently said he still thinks marijuana is a gateway drug, which we all disagree with, and it's been disproven by science. But he said to Joe Biden, he said, I thought you were high when you said that. I mean, that was an incredible line, but most importantly, he went on to make the point that marijuana is actually already legal for privileged people, and it's disproportionately black and brown communities who get hurt by the criminal justice sentences that we have now.
Absolutely.
Amy Klobuchar, Senator Klobuchar, had a good one on immigration, which is another under-discussed topic. And she said we should be living our values at the border.
Oh, I think that was actually Warren who said that. Klobuchar might have said
We'll
that.
We'll have to fact check ourselves on that.
Yeah.
But one of the women who is in the Senate had a wonderful comment about living our values at the border.
Well, let's take a look at that one-liner from Bernie Sanders that we keep going back to.
We're going to vote, and we're going to...
Or Warren.
Or Warren.
There were a lot of strong lines. Okay, let's move on to our next.
I just don't want anyone to say that we're biased towards Warren because of that. So just be clear.
On the record.
Okay.
Another award that we came up with was Biggest Troll of the Night.
Gotta be Tulsi. Gotta be Tulsi.
And do you want to speak a little more to that? I know we talked about her clashing with Harris. She got a couple other
I've already got the Tulsi tolls after me, so somebody else needs to take the hit on this one.
Carrie?
I mean, what was she doing? Just like, I mean, she just set herself up, you know. You're going to talk that much trash. Senator Harris, and especially to Senator Harris, one of the best debaters we've seen this entire time, the most, like, poised and ready for the back and forth, the heated exchange. So baiting Senator Harris was just a foolhardy rookie mistake.
Our next superlative is Cutest Couple, a yearbook favorite. What's your take?
I mean,
Yang and Steyer?
Yang and Steyer. Yang and Steyer.
Break down that moment for us.
They were just the poor lonely guys at the end of the stage that nobody paid attention to for 40 minutes.
But they still had fun with each other.
But yeah, they had that really lovely moment, right, where they were just like, oh, no, I like you too, and I like you. I mean, it was very...
He didn't get any time, neither did he. But there was, like, as you mentioned, there's a little nice interplay between Bernie and Biden as well, and I think some of that was also they're both reacting to the OK Boomer stuff. Like, I think they're not happy.
Just trying to get on the same page.
That this is where the conversation has gone culturally, and they're trying to reclaim the gravitas of the moment.
Also, I'm kind of surprised that no candidate said that. Like, Buttigieg shouldn't try to use it on Biden or somebody else, but...
Again, few cultural missteps this campaign.
True. This was not a discussion about paper straw or vicious plastic straws, which I'm relieved about. There was a 45-minute discussion on foreign policy, which was very impressive.
Right. It was pretty substantive, the issues that were covered.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the list here. They went in on Saudi Arabia, China. They actually had a conversation about the Uyghurs who are being held in concentration camps in China. Putin, endless wars, North Korea, Syria, trade, military spending, which I think is often a trade-off people look to make. And Buttigieg got that question directly about would you be taking Pentagon's had its budget go way beyond what they even requested under the Trump administration. Would you cut that back? Would you send that elsewhere? It takes, I think, $1 trillion to take care of the student debt problem, and that's the equivalent of how many new potential military airplanes. So I think this is the conversation will end up going there, even though it's not something I think most people are comfortable having. And when it comes to establishment sentiments about how you're supposed to honor veterans. In that spirit of honoring veterans, I did like that Elizabeth Warren mentioned that less than 1% of Americans actually serve in the military. And she hinted at some sort of, we all need to bear the burden of this if we're going to have this never-ending forward operating position.
Right, and she was asked that pretty explicitly also.
Also, on the subject of foreign policy, I think we got to give credit to Senator Sanders because he, unprompted, brought up what's been happening in Israel and Gaza and expressed solidarity with the Palestinians just days after the Trump administration has reversed this policy that the U.S. has had for 40 years of saying that Israeli settlements are human rights abuse. So credit to Senator Sanders for that.
A lot of strong stuff tonight, and we have 2 more superlatives to get through. The next, best mood. Not moodiness, but mood. A whole
Klobuchar, gotta be Klobuchar.
Klobuchar was a mood.
When she said, what was the line that she said? She said,
let's take a look at
the line. Oh, do we have it? Great.
Let's take a look at the line.
Great.
I think that Pete is qualified to be up on this stage, and I am honored to be standing next to him. But what I said was true. Women are held to a higher standard. Otherwise, we could play a game called Name Your Favorite Woman President.
I mean,
right?
Yeah.
Like we'd all like to play that game.
We can't. Not yet.
Also, all the vice presidents, too, have been men, too. Like, it's the
facts.
Yep.
Super facts.
And our last superlative, last but not least, is class clown, or biggest moment of laughter elicited in the audience.
Like, best laugh line, not weakest performance.
Not that they are a clown, to be clear. To be clear.
I was like, I don't know that I am a clown.
What if I found some of the smackdowns really funny?
Okay, like what?
I mean, Kamala was really, she was on fire today.
She was on fire.
We all laughed. Let's be honest.
Yes, I mean, like when we talk about who can go toe-to-toe with Trump, I mean, she really brought it in the debate, right? She had the hand motions going. She was being very blunt about her talk. So I appreciated her, but there wasn't necessarily an intentional laugh-out-loud moment.
Yeah.
I think Yang's Putin line that we mentioned was pretty funny. Kind of, but I think unscripted. Like, I don't think he was going for that.
He was asked.
That's what makes it a zinger, you know?
To be on the phone
Right, and I mean, maybe we're not being unfair to the youngest guy on the thing, that he's a class clown. I mean, maybe this is how he is shining in that moment.
He's younger than Buttigieg?
Ooh.
That's a good question.
I don't know.
I think Buttigieg is younger.
Yeah.
But it's close. It's close.
I also thought Senator Harris's punked line, all due respect, I recognize this is a debate stage, but he got punked, was hysterical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So overall, what are your biggest takeaways from this debate? What made your heart sing, and what do you hope to see in the next debate?
My biggest takeaways are that we have thought that this was down to 3 frontrunners for the most part, Biden, Warren, Sanders, until Buttigieg started polling really high and consistently in Iowa and New Hampshire. That said, I mean, Klobuchar had a great night. Harris had a great night. Booker had some breakout moments. I think it's really interesting that these candidates who aren't necessarily polling that high had these great breakout moments and talked about issues that matter to the Democratic primary voters. So I actually think, this could be a little bit of a shakeup for people who are paying attention, at least. And I'd be interested to see how their campaigns sort of spin this forward.
Yeah. And no one had a bad night. There was no one who stumbled, who was going to have a moment tomorrow where there's someone else's merch. Everyone did a pretty good job. And I'm sure that there are thousands of campaign staffers across the country that would roll their eyes at this statement. But it really seems like the pressure has come down a little bit, at least in the way that the candidates were carrying themselves and interacting with one another on stage. It was more cordial, it was more collegial, it was friendlier, more jokes. This was probably the funniest of the debates, right? So I think that signals a lot. This is going to be a long process. We still have months and months ahead of us. The candidates are easing in. They're feeling more natural with themselves and one another in this high-pressure environment. And so having that tension kind of not be the animating feature or animating characteristic of their interactions when we see them on the stage, I think is a refreshing break for voters who are trying to make up their minds in a tough environment. There's a lot of really solid people to support, and so it's nice to not have it be acrimonious.
I appreciated that they really did take the implicit hint of being in Atlanta at Tyler Perry Studios, and we saw 3 candidates very explicitly mention Black women, what they mean to the Democratic Party, and what it means to honestly engage with communities of color, and that you have to be showing up consistently, not just for a vote. And that started with Senator Harris. Senator Cory Booker continued that, and actually Senator Elizabeth Warren broke it down in terms of the black-white wealth gap and what we need to do structurally to change that. I think that definitely went to the heart of what Pete Buttigieg's surge and the challenges that he's not facing as a result of his surge. So we'll see that. I think that's worth monitoring how that plays out in the next few debates.
Well, thank you all so much for your insights. They have been invaluable. I encourage any of our viewers, if you have more questions, let us know. You can share this show with your friends. But in the meantime, Naira, Carrie, Versha, thank you for your time and your insights. If you want to keep following our coverage, visit NowThis Politics for more. I'm Zinhle Essamuah. Thank you so much for watching our pre- and post-debate shows.